employees understand the why behind what's going in an organization, be able to understand how your company makes money, how decisions are made around the money-making process, but most importantly, what can you do to drive that success? What we find working with 34 of the Fortune 50 is that our senior executives, these great companies, are doing everything they can to generate greater cash flow, generate greater profitability, drive the key metrics and strategies of their business. That being said, when you look at a company, for example, the size of PayPal at about 28,000 employees, if I remember, being able to we have your senior leaders doing everything they can to generate profitability. But as you think about who really impacts the business, it's the individual contributor, it's the manager, it's those that are right in the front line trying to drive their strategies and performance. What we find in business, though, is as we worked with some of the greatest companies in the world, is that employees are functionally brilliant. You're very good at what you do. You know more about your functional role than I would ever understand about your role. Yet from time to time, we tend to kind of go through our careers with our blinders on. I'm very focused on maybe if I'm in sales, my customer I'm working with. I'm very focused from an operational perspective, or if I'm in like an engineering role, I think about the projects I'm working on. Now, it's important to have that focus for sure. But what business and financial acumen allows us to do is to step back for a moment, get that big picture perspective, be able to think like a CEO, understand what she is focused on, what she's driving towards, and most importantly, what can I do as an individual contributor, as a manager, as a director, as a VP, whatever your role is, how can I help drive the success of a business? Well, that's what these earnings call are all about. It's a chance to step back for a moment, be able to get that big picture perspective of what the executives are focused on, and be able to articulate what can you do to drive the success of your business. So with that in mind, we're going to jump in and be able to show you a simple tool. In the time we have today, I'm going to give you a simple tool that will give you a framework, a mental model as you think about business, talk about business, and execute around business. And then I'm going to give you a couple tools. One's kind of an executive alignment tool. How do I get clear on what the executive strategy is? And then the second is a financial tool. How can I assess whether or not we're performing well? The whole goal of this is that you'd be able to, if you're publicly traded, listen to these calls and kind of capture little nuggets, little action items, things you can do to drive the success of your business, and feel more comfortable around having conversations around your corporate strategy or financial performance. Now, if you're in a privately held company, well, maybe a company you sell into that happens to be public. It may be that I want to understand companies I want to invest in. In the end, I'm going to give you a simplified tool that I promise you, as you use that, it will absolutely build your credibility, build your career, and build your organization. Well, with that being said, the second tool we're going to be using is we're going to be using some poll questions. So let me start by just getting a feel for who's with us right now. This open enrollment, how to listen to an earnings call webinar. You should see a poll question on your screen there. Just go ahead and select it. Make sure you hit submit so we can calculate that. But the question really is have you had a chance to participate in one of these webinars before? If not, no worries. Just to give you a feel, every month we take a time to go through a different company's financial quarterly performance, using this tool as a way to continue to strengthen your capabilities around assessing a company's earnings call. How can I get from the earnings call the strategic focus of the business, but as well, how can I connect to how they're financially performing? How can I use that in whatever role I might play? These calls happen on a quarterly basis. Companies are not required to have these calls. That being said, by far, I'd say 99.9% of companies will take the chance to, once they've submitted their financial performance to the Security Exchange Commission, to have these calls. It's a chance to give a little bit of marking about kind of where they are, where they want to go, and how they're performing. It's also a chance to be able to speak to their performance, to have analysts kind of question them. So these calls are available every quarter, and we provide once a month a chance to practice using the tools. We look at all different industries, and whether for many participants who come to these, if you've been through one of our programs, this is a follow-on. You think of our main courses as, think of them kind of like a boot camp. You go get the basic foundation, but how can I continue to build my capability around this? This is one of the activities that we provide as a resource for anybody who's participating. That being said, if you've never been through our course, no worries. You can absolutely use this tool with little to no background in business business and financial acumen. Now, of course, if you want greater detail, we've got online resources that are awesome, a great way for you to kind of build your capabilities. If you want us to come in and share this type of training with you and your teams, would love to be able to do that. But our big goal with this webinar is to give a chance to help people understand kind of how to use these tools and assess the communication on a quarterly basis from an earnings call. So, well, it looks like we got a good group of you that are brand new. So thank you. Great to have you. If you've just gone through our course as a graduate, congratulations. If you're just found out through a colleague, friend, you have no clarity of what we do. Hopefully today I'll inspire you enough to say, you know what, I can do this. I'm already functionally brilliant. I'm going to step back once a quarter, take the tools and be able to assess my company, assess a customer, or maybe even assess a company you want to invest in. Well, with that in mind, those are kind of the two tools, the chat box and the poll questions we'll be using. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going as we kind of look at PayPal. As we look at PayPal, let's jump in. So when's the last time you listened to an earnings call is kind of the question. You came to this experience today wanting to build that capability. So my second poll question is, when's the last time you've had a chance to participate or listen to an earnings call? Now that could be your own earnings call if it's your own company. Could be a customer you're is trying to assess. By the way, if you're in a sales role, I can't think of a better tool than the tool I'm going to provide you today as a way to truly align with what your customer is trying to do. If you can understand what your customer strategy is and be able to help them internally make a case as to why your products or services will drive to their key strategic objectives, it'll be a game changer. You'll get basically, they'll see you rather than a sales individual, they'll see you as a partner, somebody who really understands what they're trying to do and helping them to succeed. So if you're in a sales role, this is a great tool and a great resource to do that. Absolutely valuable. So as you listen to these calls, as we look at that experience, they happen on a quarterly basis. These companies will give you availability of what's happening. Of course, we just ended for the calendar year. We've just ended Q3 at the end of September of this year. So we're into about 15, 16 days, 17, where are we at? 18 days, where are we at today? Into Q4 experience. So you get this information 4 times a year is a great resource. Well, you've come to this program. Now, maybe you've been told to come here. Maybe you were part of one of our programs and we invited you. Well, you're here. So now what do you hope to get out of that? As you think about these earnings calls and how to assess and think about the tools I'm going to provide for you today, let me just start by some challenges that businesses face. 95% of employees don't understand company strategy. That's a stat that comes from Harvard Business Review. Now you might say, wait a second, Brent, in my company, we're really good at being able to assess and understand our corporate strategy. That being said, there's a large percent. We're really good about knowing our individual functional role and what I'm focused on. But how often are we able to tie that to our corporate strategy? For example, every year we do performance planning, right? Where you get a chance to say, what are my goals? But one of the parts of that strategic performance planning is to align your goals to what the company does. I remember doing a training where an individual had been with the company for many, many years, goes through this training where they could understand what their executives were talking about, get clear around strategy, get clear around performance. His comment at the very end of the course, he says, I finally know what to put on my performance plan. I can align with the strategic objective. Now, folks, if it was just 20 of us coming together as a business, we could talk a lot about what the goals are, what we're doing. Every week we can meet as a team for a team meeting and walk through that. But when you're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in some company, how do you get people to truly understand what the strategy is and, more importantly, how they can impact that? Well, here's another sobering stat. 90% of employees don't understand their company's important business metrics. If I was going to come up with the top 10 metrics of your company, here's some of the common ones. Cash flow, free cash flow, operating income, EBITDA, gross profit, earnings per share, return on invested capital, all these different metrics that matter, total shareholder return. If I was to come up with your top 10 metrics, and you had to call your peers, say, what are they, why they're important, how do we impact them? I find as I work with companies, there's specific metrics that you deal with day in and day out. You're absolutely all over. But you think about the bigger picture of the company. What are the key metrics we're communicating to the market? I would suggest it's very common. As part of our course, for example, we do a little pop quiz at the very beginning where people get a chance to walk through and assess those key 10 metrics for their company. And often employees, yeah, I've heard of them. I don't know that I could explain them. And in some cases, I don't know exactly how I'm impacted. Well, with these kind of challenging stats, imagine you're a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar PayPal, right? First half of this year, about $13 billion in revenue, in the mid-20s to low 30s in total full-year revenue. You got 29,000 employees. Here's some stats. Now, interesting enough about this, Dan Schulman was their CEO up until September 27th of this year. Their new CEO is Alex Chriss. Now, as you look at this, and he's just barely been put in as of September 27th. Now, when this call happened, Mr. Schulman was the CEO. But you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You're competing with the likes of Visa and MasterCard as you think about the transaction of basically connecting merchandisers or merchants with consumers. Even the peer-to-peer component that we're looking at. Just this last year, for example, 23 billion global transactions. That's how many times people transacted with them. 1.3 trillion payment transactions. Now, that's total dollars kind of going through. Now, just to compare, Visa is about 10 times this. MasterCard was about 8 trillion. So they're not a small player by any means. They actually transact more than if you have a Discover card. They actually have more dollars going through their transaction than Discover has. So interesting company. We've all heard of PayPal, but you may not know all the components of PayPal. Big in e-commerce, of course. 44% of their employee base is in the Americas. 43% is in Asia Pacific. 13% in Europe. You got 150 nationalities that are employees of this company. So this 29,000, almost 30,000 employees is made up of 150 nationalities. Your goal is to be able to move money anywhere in the world. That's what you're trying to do. The capability of transacting wherever you are in the world. PayPal is a significant company. Now, you think about those stats I had talked about earlier. 95% of employees don't understand your strategy. 90%, whatever that percent is in your company, it can be tough. And the real question is, if you're in a large corporation, you got your senior leaders, what is it they want your customers to know? What is it that they want your employees to know to make sure your employees are driving towards the key objectives and goals? How can I make sure they understand that? But more importantly, what they can do to impact that? What is it you want your shareholders to know? What is it you want partners to know? Thus the title of this webinar. What's the CEO wants you to know? What is it that you can understand? Can you step back for a moment, be able to use these tools to assess both the strategic focus of the company you have an interest in, as well as their financial performance, and then help make good decisions around the process, whatever it is you're looking at in the company you're looking at? Well, that's what this tool is all about. Now, not only is this valuable from the ability for you to understand your business, but I'm going to suggest you today, if you're a leader in an organization, if you personally are struggling with your engagement, there's a stat that every year Gallup looks at, and it's how engaged is the U.S. employee population. This is 2022 numbers. 68% of employees, U.S. employees, are either disengaged or actively disengaged. Now, you may disagree with the stat. This is their research. I mean, it's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of assessments. It's a pretty big report. They do it every single year. Well, I want to suggest to you, the more your employee understands what's going on, why we're doing it, and how they can impact it, it changes the game on engagement. So not only is it valuable for your ability to build your credibility and career, but my suggestion to you is the more you're understanding what your company's trying to do, the more you have built your business acumen, you'll actually see an improvement in engagement scores, personally, your own engagement, but if you're in a leadership role, your team. So I'm going to suggest you that business acumen is a leadership competency. The more you can help employees understand why we're doing what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and how they can impact it, it's a game changer. In fact, this comes from Corporate Leadership Council. So if 68% of employees are disengaged, what can we do to engage? right here, top levers for engagement. Make the connection between the work and organizational strategy. Well, I can't think of a better way to help tie somebody's work to the strategy by making sure they understand what the strategy is, how we're performing around that strategy, what's our goals in the coming quarters, in the coming years. And again, how do you make that connection? And that's this one right here, right? How does your job drive organizational success? Boy, I've been in 27 years of working and developing people, developing organizations. And you think about a leadership program, you also often have three parts of a leadership program. Leading yourself, that's where you do like the personality test or leadership styles, all the different strength finders. To understand you as an individual and the leadership you'll bring to the table. The second part of a leadership competency or leadership program is leading others. This is where you get coaching, you get feedback, you get communication, you get delegation, all the other topics of leadership that you typically think of. The third part of a leadership development program is leading the company or leading the business. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that this concept, once you understand your business, you understand what the metrics are, you understand why they're important, but most importantly, you understand how you impact it, and you can help others make the connection of how they impact it, what the strategy is and how they impact it, your engagement scores are going to skyrocket. So folks, this is not just about understanding business and the economics of business. I'm going to suggest to you this is absolutely a leadership competency. If you're able to develop, to think like a CEO, be able to understand what she's communicating, what she's driving toward, and then take it back to your team or take it back to your individual role. My guarantee to you is it will absolutely build your credibility. It will build your career. It will build your company, and it'll also increase your engagement. So that's what this tool is all about. That's the goal of what I want to accomplish today, is give you a simple tool, a framework, and two tools that will help you assess this every quarter, every year as you continue to progress within your role, whatever company you're working with. So with that in mind, let me give you the framework, the process, 3 steps. You got to prepare for these. You got to analyze. You got to apply. So let's jump to the prepare phase. Now, don't worry. I'm going to give you the very end. You'll be able to access this. You'll have it available. But let me just start by talking about these calls. They happen on a quarterly basis. I shared a little bit about them already. They're basically broken into 2 parts. There's prepared remarks where your senior executives are going to communicate to the market. In the case of PayPal, it was Mr. Schulman, their CEO, and their senior VP and acting CFO, Gabriel Rabinovich, I think. Hopefully I didn't butcher that name. But they were the 2 that communicated. So basically they come prepared. The CEO spoke, and then the acting CFO spoke. They kind of share their message. Now, interesting thing is you listen to these, recognize that's not required. They're choosing to do this. So it's not regulated. They're not required as to what they say or not. In fact, they typically start with their investor relations individual saying, look, we're going to make some forward-looking statements. We can't be held accountable for these. Basically, they're to kind of protect themselves. We're going to share everything we can, but in the end, we're not expected to update these. In the end, things may change. Of course, we're in a dynamic market, et cetera. They're going to give you their spin, a little bit of their communication. Now, the interesting thing about it is they can't just communicate like a marketing pitch without some accountability. That's the second part of the call. The second part of the call is you have analysts. These are large investment groups, Barclays, Wolf Research, Wells Fargo, these big investment companies, they're tracking the stock. So they have analysts who get on the call, they listen to what's been communicated. They also have financial information. They have kind of documents that have been sent out to them that they're trying to clarify, like, what are you really saying? And do I believe it? Can I predict based upon what you said, what's going to happen in your stock price? So it's kind of a 2-part segment. Usually there's somewhere between kind of a short one would be like a 45-minute, a long one would be an hour and a half. Most of them are around that 50 minutes to an hour time frame. Now, in these calls, so how do I prepare for them? Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to locate the call or access it. So it's very easy to do this. You can actually go to any company's website, look for their investor relation, and kind of navigate that way. I'm going to suggest to you, though, probably the easiest way to do that is just to jump to a basic Google web page, and you're going to just put it in. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. All I'm going to do is I'm going to type in who I'm calling. And since I've already done it, you can see some of it coming up. But if I just start putting PayPal, it's going to start guessing. Now, you'll notice it guessed right to here, PayPal earnings call. I see that, I'm there. I can just click on that, and it's going to take me to various places I can access their Q2 2023 information. Now, here's a little base kind of overview of some numbers, how they performed, whether they beat or whether they were able to outperform. So they missed on their earnings per share. They beat by 0.2% on their revenue. So they overperformed on revenue. They didn't quite hit their earnings per share calculation. Here's some other metrics you can get. But the key thing I'm looking for is I want to get to the company itself. You'll notice as you scroll through, you're going to get third-party companies. This one's very famous, Motley Fool. That's one that's very common. Another one I really like, it's called Seeking Alpha, although boy, their SEO is not working so good. They didn't get in the top 10. But Seeking Alpha is one that I really like quite a bit. But I want to look for the company itself. So I click there. We're there. I have the information. Now, because the call has already happened, I have all the post-course information. Now, let's see if I can check this. I didn't check this before. I should have looked at that. Yeah, right here. Here you go. So they've already got, because it's the end of the quarter's already happened, they're going to start communicating to the market when their next call. So this is a great example. So if I want to get ready for that call, I click there, and it's going to ask me to register with that. Now, don't worry. The account, they're just going to get your basic information. Give them an email. You don't want them to, they're not going to flood it with a bunch of stuff. They're just going to give you access to the call itself. So you click on that. Usually it gives you an invite, you put on your calendar, you're ready to go. Now, if the call has already happened, which this one's already happened, of course, then once the call happens, a recording for the call. You want to listen to the most recent call? It's right there. Now, because I haven't registered for it, it's not going to come up. But if you have an account, it automatically comes up for you. You're ready to go. You have what you need, and you can listen to the call. In addition to that, they're required to give to the market some financial data and financial information. You'll see here, you got a news release. It's a little over. These are really great. It gives you highlights of some of the information that they want to communicate. It's basically a summary of what they talked about in the call. You also see kind of some slide type material. Now, this is not a slide deck, but if you listen to the call, they pulled up some of these sheets. Here's their cash flow. What's happening with the free cash flow? So they give you a little highlights. That's a great little data point or resource you can have to kind of use as you get going with the content here. So the next thing that you would look for is some companies will have a transcript, like actually what was said in the call. You have who talked, what they said, when they said it. So all that information. So there's a couple ways to look at this. You could do it before the call, where you go and you actually register, and then you listen to it, you walk through and go through the exercise. Or if it's like, hey, it's too early in the morning, I can't do it. It's all going to get recorded, and you're going to have some additional resources where you can come back and access all their financial information. You can look at what they said, exact word for word what they said. That's how you access the call. So once you've accessed or got prepared to listen to it, or it's already happened and you access the transcript, all that information, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're preparing for that call, is you want to review any prior quarterly notes. If you've listened to them before, if you've engaged with them, you're going to go through that process, right? You're going to be able to look at what they're talking about, why they're talking about prior quarters. So then when you look at the most recent, you see if anything's changed. The last thing I'd suggest is meet with your team. What do I mean by that? Actually sit down with your team and go through this exercise. It's a great way to develop their understanding of what's going on in your business. So that's the prepare. You got to locate or get access to either before the call, the meeting, get ready to listen to it, or after the call, the transcripts or recording, then review your notes and go through it with your team. Now, once you've prepared for it, the biggest part of the tool is an analysis. How do I analyze it? How do I make sense? There's a lot of information. How can I pull that together? Well, I'm going to suggest to you a simple framework that will help with this. For those that have been through our course, open your chat box and let's help. I want to do a quick review. So those that haven't been, let me give you a high level, a basic way to think about the business. It's called the 5-driver business model. These are the fundamental drivers every company focuses on. Whether you're a multi-billion-dollar PayPal or small mom and pop shop, these are the fundamental drivers every company focuses on. Cash, profit, asset growth, and people. This simple framework is a great way to think about business, to talk about business, and to execute on. What do I mean by that? Being able to listen to a call and say, so which of the 5 drivers do they seem to be focusing on? Rather than trying to capture everything they say, they seem to be really focusing on a lot about profitability, a lot about growth. They seem to be talking a lot about their customer base. Okay, this simple framework helps you to kind of consolidate that into a simple way to think about what they're communicating to the market. So we talk about cash, just for help for the rest of the group. When we talk about cash, it's vitally important. In fact, there's a common phrase, cash is blank. Put it in the chat box if you would. Cash is blank. What would you say? If somebody said cash is, what would you fill in as the blank? Cash is king. David says king. Absolutely. Oxygen. I love that. Someone will say it's like the lifeblood of a company. It's you have to have cash is required to grow and maintain a business. It's the blood. Absolutely vitally important. So what you want to know is, what do we mean by cash? What are we looking at? There's two common metrics we look at. One is called cash and cash equivalent, kind of like a savings account. It's a place where companies hold on to cash for future investment, a place where they have cash for unexpected expenses, very much like you or I would have a savings account. That's what their cash and cash equivalent account. Now, the market doesn't like that to continue to go up, because investors, if that keeps going up, investors can say, wait a second, give us more money. The other metric we typically look at, the most base level, is this one right here. It's called cash flow. The key metric is called cash flow from operation. It really represents how much cash does the company generate from their core business. So when I'm listening to the company, I want to listen, are they talking about their cash position? They're talking about liquidity, just another term for cash. They talk about cash flow or cash generation. Then I'm as I hear them say that, I'm thinking, okay, they're talking about cash here. Profit, on the other hand, is the difference between two levers, increasing one thing or decreasing another. For those that have been through our program, or others, if you're just familiar with what drives profitability, what would you say? If I want to grow my profit, there's two levers I have. I can increase one thing, or I can decrease something. Anybody remember what those are? Put them in my chat box. If you want to grow profitability in a business, if you want to be listening to what are the levers, what might they communicate around profitability? Absolutely. They're going to talk about increasing our revenue or our sales, right? Anything that talks about increased revenue or sales or top line, pricing is part of that. Yeah. How can I grow my revenue? I can do it by charging more, or I can do it by selling more. That's how I drive that revenue. The second is reducing my cost, or if you look at a whole company, it's expense. So when I listen to these calls, I listen, are they talking about revenue? Are they talking about sales? Are they talking about cost? They talk about margin. They're talking about the various types of profitability, gross profit, operating profit, net profit. Are they talking about income? Are they talking about earnings? All of those are profitability type communications. Now, if you wanted to know to see what's going on, you're going to look at that income statement. That's where you'd see what's going on. This driver by far is the one every single one of us impact. Right here, if you don't impact revenue, which in a lot of companies, not everybody drives the revenue. I'm a trainer, so mine's kind of a cost side. Well, I absolutely can impact the cost of a business. Now, assets is anything we own or control which has value. You think about a company like PayPal. What do they own or control which has value? Now, I do a lot of work in the oil and gas industry. We're talking refineries, we're talking pipelines, we're talking about big trucks, a lot of equipment, right? What about a PayPal? What do they own or control which has value? What would be on their balance sheet? Do they have a bunch of trucks, a bunch of equipment? Not really. What would you guess? At a PayPal, what would be some of their things they own or control which has value? Put it in my chat box. Now, if you want to understand what are their assets, you look at their balance sheet to kind of see that. People's ID. Well, we don't actually own or control people, although sometimes it may feel that way. That being said, how many have ever heard an executive say our people are our greatest assets? So from an accounting perspective, you're not going to see a line on your balance sheet. Here's the value of our people. That being said, absolutely, people are there. But as you think about, servers, data centers, intellectual property, chip, absolutely. These are the types of things that companies have, that they own or control, which have value. So these assets, I want to grow my assets. I want to have more assets to deploy that generate greater cash flow, greater profitability in our business. So what do I have, and how do I use what I have is what assets is all about. So as I listen to a company's earnings call, I'm listening for, hey, I got some new technology I'm going to deploy in my company. They talk a lot about their e-commerce platform. Well, that's an asset. They're selling that asset to allow customers to connect with merchants, right? So I'm listening for, what are they talking about? New technologies, new innovation, new products that I'm providing. That's all about assets. Now, of course, growth is what investors expect. People are what drive it. Both that external customer, those are buy or use your product or services, as well as internal. How do we get teams executing? Well, folks, with that simple model, you can now get introduced to two simple tools that will help you in the analysis. The first tool is called the Executive Alignment Tool. And by the way, thank you, everybody, for joining in that conversation and quick review on the 5 drivers. Now, don't worry. If you haven't been through our course, this tool is going to give you everything you need to do a quick understanding of what's going on in an earnings call. If you want more detail, reach out to us. We've got a self-paced online learning you can do. Or if you got a group you want to take, we'll walk you through how to think about this in your company. But here's how the tool works. We call it the executive alignment. So once you found the call, you registered for the call, or maybe the call's already happened, you got a transcript, you're going to go through and just listen. The first part, all I'm trying to do is hear what they say or read what they say and kind of make sense of it through the lens of these 5 drivers. So I'm listening to the call, and every time they talk about we increased our cash generation, I'm going to put a little slash mark. They talk about by the way, increased cash generation. I'm probably going to hit cash. I'm going to hit growth. So you're listening for what are they talking about? You put a little slash mark every time they say something about each one of these drivers. They talk about, hey, my top line revenue increased by 8%. Well, I'm going to give a line for profitability because it's revenue. I'm also going to give another line for profitability. They talk about, we got this new platform that allows e-commerce to transact at a much quicker. Well, I think assets and maybe people, right? A new platform for their customers, people. So that's how it works. You're just listening, trying to capture what are they really talking about, just using the 5 fundamental drivers. Now, some of you might say, well, wait a second, Brent. I got your brief introduction to the 5 drivers, but I don't know that I feel comfortable to understand what they mean by cash, what words to listen to. Well, that's the genius of the tool. Our instructional design team's done a great job. They give you a quick definition of each one of these drivers. So again, you don't have to have been through our course to get it. Quick definition, but the real part I love, I call these examples. I call them trigger words. I'm actually listening for, they talk about stock buybacks. If you listen to PayPal, where are they taking their extra free cash flow? They're doing stock buybacks. So that's a use of cash. It takes cash to buy back stock. I'm paying dividends. Okay, well, that's use of cash. I'm giving cash to my investors. So definitely if they talk about dividends, I'm going to do a slash mark around cash. I might also do a slash mark around people, because who's getting that dividend? The shareholder, right? Folks, that's how it works. You just basically go through, you'll listen to it. What are they talking about? If you're questioning, well, is it cash? Is it profit, etc.? Look at the examples and see if that helps you kind of get your mind around it. Now, folks, when you do this, it's not an exact science. Meaning, if you and I were to go through and listen to this call and do this exact exercise, we are not going to get the exact same number of slash marks. That being said, every year we do over 1,000 of these sessions, and invariably the top 2 or 3 line items will go to the top every single time. So once you've done that assessment on listening to the call, the second part of the tool is to answer 4 simple questions. Which drivers seem to get the most attention? Just adding up the numbers here. And I love the second part. And why? Well, who are they talking to? If they're talking externally, you might see certain drivers getting greater focus. Versus internally, you might see something different. If it's part of like some big association meeting, you might even see a different focus area. Get clear about why they're talking about, who they're speaking to, or what's going around in their industry that might impact their focus area. What are the 2 or 3 main points the executive is trying to make? What goals and trends or objectives are going forward? And finally, what key questions or concerns were raised by analyst community? I love this question because a lot of times people will listen to these calls and they say, I just listen to the prepared remark. Now, that's fine. That's a good starting point. But one of the greatest values is if you listen to what the analysts say, you see whether or not they're questioning what's being communicated. Remember, these are not required. This is not regulated. They have a big disclaimer at the very beginning. But the analysts kind of keep them in check a little bit. So if they talk about rapid growth and they want to invest in growth, analysts, if they don't see that in the numbers, they're going to ask, well, it sounds like you really want to invest in growth, but I notice your capital spend is down year over year. Help me kind of understand what you're thinking there. So they actually try and clarify what's going on. The last thing you can do once you've gone through that whole assessment, just see what the market, how they respond to the call. This tool will help you to kind of get to that. Well, folks, we've got about 25 minutes left. What I want to do in the remaining time is I want to walk through the call using this tool. So the first thing I want to do is I've got on the screen, open your chat box. I've got 3 quotes for you. These 3 quotes are going to provide for you a great opportunity to practice using the tool. So here's what you want to do. I'm going to read through Dan's, one of his key comments. And all I want you to do is in the chat box, put me which of these 5 drivers are they focused on. So this first sentence, I'm proud of the PayPal team as we delivered another solid quarter. Revenues came in above the top end of our guidance, and non-GAAP EPS grew 24% and to $1.16, in line with our midpoint of our guidance. So which of the 5 drivers do you see just in that first sentence there? Okay, yeah, we're getting people, right? The team, right? PayPal team, and that's internal team. We're also seeing revenue generation. So that's going to be a profitability. Grew. We're seeing a lot about growth. Obviously, if I generate more revenue, that potentially is going to give me more cash. So you can make a connection there. Okay, excellent. Let's do the next one. And we are reiterating our guidance for non-GAAP EPS and operating margin expansion for the full year. What are they saying in that sentence? Yes, when I see EPS, that's earnings per share. You could say profit per share. That's a profitability metric for sure. And then margin expansion. What would that be? Well, anytime I hear margin, that's another form of profitability. So profit expanding, we're getting growth. Absolutely. Okay, you guys are getting this. Encouragingly, e-commerce growth appears to have stabilized the mid-single digits, substantially above our estimate when we enter 2023. Which driver there? Some of the drivers you have, there's a growth. I mean, it says it right there. It gives you the word. Pretty easy when it gives you the word. Our branded checkout volumes grew roughly in line with our industry in Q2 and accelerated in nearly 6.5%, there's the word, growth in the month of June and in July. Our branded checkout volume growth accelerated again. So in July, they got 6.5% growth in June, 8% growth in July. Our highest monthly growth rate since, boy, there's a lot of growth in that one sentence there. Finally, we expect branded checkout volumes will strengthen throughout the back half of the year, supported by transaction from our key strategic initiatives. Well, folks, what have I heard just in this one, 4 or 5 sentences? A lot about growth. A lot about profitability, a little bit about cash here, a little bit about people, but definitely a lot about growth and profitability for sure. Not only do you get the CO communication, here is Gabrielle, she's speaking. I'm not going to read it. You just look through it and just put in the chat box, what are you seeing here? Which of the 5 drivers you're seeing communicated? I'll let you review it. I'll underline some trigger words that might help. You're starting to see some themes here, right? And just 2 quotes, we're starting to see some of the different ones that are rising to the top. You're getting you're getting a little bit here, maybe some assets, you're getting a little bit, but predominantly, you guys are all hitting the key ones. What are they? We're seeing a lot on growth, a lot of profit, right? That's the communication I'm seeing. Now, not only can you see the internal, the prepared remarks, but even in the the analyst questions. That picture's not a very good one of Darren, but this is Darren here. Comes from Wolf Research. But what did he focus on? You start to see some real themes here as you read through his communication. So not only is it the internal prepared remarks, but it's the analysts asking the questions as well. You start to see some themes here, right? Again, you're getting revenue growth, profit dollars. We're talking about one-time grow-overs and hedging of differences. Here's some assets. One of their main assets, it's a non-branded e-commerce tool called Braintree. How it's impacting the industry, profitability down here. I mean, you're seeing a lot of growth and profitability. Now, again, this is not an exact science. At the end of this, if you were to do this, it might look something like this, where you've gone through and you've kind of done an assessment on what did they do in their prepared remarks and what did they do with the analyst questions. In the end, your numbers may not be the same numbers that I've got right here. And you may not look exactly like this, but we just saw in 3 quotes that definitely growth and profitability seem to be rising to the top. Now, folks, if we had more time, I'd turn you loose. Okay, now read the rest of it, go through and do it. We don't have that time. So I've done that for you. So let me share the rest of the tool. Here's kind of that, here's the slash marks, but let's go through the questions real quickly and what I saw, what was communicated. So the question was, which of the 5 drivers seem to get the most attention? Let's start there. So the ones that got most attention were growth and profitability. And I give some examples, some things that kind of stood out in their communication. I've added here to the list so you can see. Here's some quotes. Revenues came in above the top end of our guidance. So not only did we grow, but we outperformed what we told the market. Now, is that positive? Is that kind of okay? Or is that down? Absolutely positive. Market loves to see that. And give some example where growth came. Earnings per share grew 24% to the dollar amount. E-commerce, my e-commerce growth appears to have stabilized to mid-single digits, substantially above our estimate. So we're seeing, again, growth. What's growing? The e-commerce platform that they're looking at. Our branded checkout volumes grew roughly. So a lot about growth, and what's growing, it's the profitability. Now, why is that? My why comment is kind of the last one here. Since COVID, this whole industry has had huge growth opportunity, right? You think about COVID and e-commerce, how it exploded. You go to Amazon example, for example, Q2 of 2020, at that time was the most revenue they had ever generated in their whole existence. Now, typically Q2 is the slowest quarter of the year for them, but they outperformed Q4 of 2019 by about $10 billion, significant growth. Well, as everybody goes online during COVID, you see this huge growth in the industry. So why are they talking about it? Well, it's because the whole industry is growing. They want to show that they are growing and where they're capturing market share. The other thing is, who are they speaking to? What's analysts? As you think about analysts, one of the big things they're going to be looking at is what's happening from a growth perspective. They represent shareholders who want to see growth in your business. So significantly growth on their platforms, significant growth on their key profitability metrics. Why are they focused on it? Because their whole industry is growing. They want to show their value, that they continue to hit numbers and continue to grow, as well as being able to speak to the future potential of growth that investors could expect. The underlying message is, hey, if you're not with us, here's why you want to be with us. If you are with us, here's why you want to stay with us. We got growth and our profitability all across the board. So next question, well, what were some of the 2 or 3 main points? Now, what was interesting on this call? With Dan leaving and Alex going to be taking his place, this was about a month before, well, a little bit, I think it was August 3rd, if I remember right, was the date of this, or August 2nd. So it was about a month or so before Alex took over, almost 2 months, to be honest, because it was September 27th. At the very end of his communication, he gives these kind of bullets, and there's more than 3, but there's a bit of him kind of wrapping up. Here's my experience as the CEO of PayPal. Here's the main points I want you to walk, and there's like 5 of them. The first thing, it's almost like a little assessment of his tenure as CEO. He says, we have a lot of energy and confidence that we are on the right path with good momentum. A second key message, many of the headwinds we faced are now turning into tailwinds. Some of the headwinds were they had certain expenses at one point, they didn't have it at another point. They've had some changing in accounting rules that impacted how they were accounting for stuff. But they're kind of on the other side of those things, is what he's saying. We're executing with a high degree of excellence. We have a firm handle on our business model and can point to numerous successes already making a real difference in the market, which will only continue to compound over time. Their volume is outperforming. I mean, maybe an American Express, a Visa, as you think about big kind of connection points, Visa and MasterCards, they're starting to compete with some of those big credit card companies on an e-commerce level. Pretty sizable for sure. And then finally, the last thing they talked about, PayPal is an increasingly strong position, and we are poised to deliver for our customers and our shareholders. So I put 5 points, and there's a bit of, he wraps up the message, said, here's kind of the end message I want you to take away. And it's a bit of the end of his tenure. Now he's moving to the board. Alex taking over as the CEO. But this is a little bit of, hey, here's kind of where we're at, Q2. But here's the top 5 things I want you to take away. Now, what's the underlying message for investors? Hey, we know what we're doing. We know why we're doing it, and we're performing well. It's that confidence they're trying to build that hopefully keeps them engaged with their investments with PayPal. So what are the goals? What are the trends? So spend a lot of time talking about the rest of the year. So Q4, we expect our top line to accelerate to low double digits growth in Q4. So low double digit. Remember, they're about 8% in July. So they're expecting, obviously, the second half of the year, you get more e-commerce happening as we get later in the year, particularly Q4. We expect transaction margin dollars to increase. Now, one of the challenges they were facing was they were getting greater revenue, but their costs were high, and so it was impacting their margins. They're trying to strengthen the cost side or reduce some of their cost side, and that's what they talk about. While our operating expenses continue to create significant leverage, they're trying to strengthen their margins by, they're already growing their top line, but how can I use AI technology to lower my cost per transaction? Well, all that together in connection with our share buybacks enables us to target low, mid EPS growth for the remainder of 2023, even as we begin to lap the increase we enjoyed in our interest income. So a year ago, they had some big interest benefits they had where they took some of their cash, much like a bank, much like a credit card. They take some of that, they invest it and get some returns on it. They had some interest benefits last year, and then they haven't had that this year. The market's dropped on them a little bit this year. Well, finally, what are the key strategic priorities? Branded checkouts and to continue to grow that. PayPal Commerce Platform, it's PPCP is what they refer to it as, and continue to strengthen their digital wallet, where all the different places that they can play with their products or services. So finally, the last thing that I would say was a big conversation around AI, and AI helps to lower their cost up here. It also helps them to predict what people are buying, where they're buying. Think about it. All the transactions they gain help them to be more predictive about what we may want to purchase in the future. So their ability to market to us based upon what we're buying. If you're using PayPal, if you're using Venmo, they're tracking it. Whether you like it or not, they're tracking it. That allows them to target marketing ability to find the products or service you may be interested in. And so AI was a big conversation for them. So finally, what were the key questions? Well, a lot around kind of the platform and the rollouts. How are we doing on that rollout? Are we seeing some improvement? It's a new platform that they've integrated. Revenue growth versus profit dollars. This idea of you're growing your top line, but your dollar amounts aren't growing as fast. What are you doing to kind of strengthen your cost side of that? The margins we talked about, and then growth. That was kind of the key focused area that they talked about. Well, folks, that's the first part of the tool. Now, what do I know at this point? Well, I know they had a great Q3. I know for the year, they had a strong performance. They got a lot of growth and profitability successful. They expect to see continued growth through the rest of this year. And in particular, they're trying to reduce their cost side as they grow their top line with their new platforms and new technologies they're trying to use. Well, if I'm an employee, then I take that back and say, so what can I do to drive profitability? What can I do to drive growth? If I have any part in the cost side, how can I manage or mitigate costs that allow us to generate more of these profit dollars that the market's asking for? Very simplified as how you can do that. Well, now you got the strategy part. How do I get to the financial part? Well, the second tool I want to introduce you that's part of our tool is called the Navigating the Financial. Now, folks, if you've been through our class, you're very familiar with this. What I love about this tool, it brings everything we communicate into the class into kind of one page. You have the 5 drivers we just covered: cash, profit, asset growth, and people. Now, the key metrics companies. Now, when we do a customized program, we're looking at your specific key metrics and measures. The tool you're going to see here and the tool we're giving you is a generic. These are the top 10 most common metrics you would see any company focus on. Now, for example, PayPal, they actually have an operating income measure as a key profitability. Now, they will look at net profit, but if you wanted to get specific to them, you would look at their operating profit number that they look at. Each company may have some nuance here, but if you don't know what their metrics are, this is a very easy, simplified key metrics most companies are going to focus on. So you have both what the metrics are. You also, what line items do you look for in the statements to find those metrics and measures? The genius of this tool, in my opinion, is right here. It tells you where to go to find it. You don't have to memorize. You don't even have to been through a course to be able to assess these metrics or measures. If there's any sort of calculation, you'd have the calculations right here. So folks, we only have about 10 minutes left, and I don't have time to go through all of it, but let's just practice doing a few together, okay? So here's how it works. So you're comfortable using this as I give you the tool here in about 10 minutes. Here's how you're going to look at it. If I want to find cash, just to get your chat box out, just to make sure we're comfortable using my tool, which statement do I need to go to find my cash number? What statement would I go to based upon my tool? See if you can use the tool, put in the chat box. What statement do I have to go to based on this tool? What statement I need to go to? Yeah, I'm gonna go to that balance sheet. Now you don't have the balance sheet, but I've got it right here. If you've been through our class, you'll remember it's listed by most liquid down to least liquid. So I'm looking for how much cash did they have on hand at June 30th, 2023. You should be able to see it now. Put in the chat box once you've seen it. Cash and cash equivalents, the line I'm looking for. How much cash did they have on hand? Put it in the chat box. Excellent. There you go. It's right here, right? 5.5 billion. So I pull it over. I then go to my cash from operations. What statement am I going to go to? Put in the chat box. There you go. We got our cash flow statement right here. I'm going to go. There's no calculation. So all I'm going to do is turn to that cash flow statement. Now, this is a little tricky here. This is how much they did for 6 months, 970. But I want to get just the quarter one because I'm only looking at the quarter. So if I jump to first quarter, they generated $1,170,000,000 in Q1. But by Q2, so taking Q1 and Q2 together, they actually reduced their cash position by about 200 million. So you actually take the difference between, if you just want the quarter. Now, if I want for 6 months, this is the 6-month number. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Q 970, compare it to where we were at Q1. We actually had a reduction of cash by 200 million. Now, if you wanted more time, if you had more time, you'd go back and you'd actually look and you'd notice that right here, they had a change of accounting rules that really ate up some of their cash. And that's why you see it swinging pretty heavily that way. But net amount, they reduced their cash by 200 million. Folks, you can kind of see how that works. So the next one I'd get my total revenue. The statement I'm going to go to is my income statement. We click over that. I'm doing the quarterly numbers. So I want to get their net revenue number. That's going to be right here. I pull that over. I got net revenue. I do the same thing on net income. I'm going to my income statement. Go to that statement. Bottom line right here. Pull that in. Now I've got that calculation. If I want to get my net profit margin, all I'm going to do is take this number divided by this number, and that gives me this. What that tells me, for every $100 they brought into their company in the first, in Q2 of this year, Q2 of this year, they generate $14.10 of profitability. Now, the question is that good or bad? Well, S&P 500 last year, 2022, was about 11.4%. So it's a little bit higher than the S&P 500. So I'd suggest it's pretty good. Well, now you can go through and you can do the rest of the calculations. Now, I can compare quarter to quarter numbers. That's what you see right here, which is great. I want to see how Q2 of this year did to Q2 of last year. You can also do Q2 of this year versus Q1 of 2023 if you wanted to. Now, you can do it year to date as well. Now, that's most common. You look at, okay, for the first 6 months, how we do. You'll notice their margin is a little bit down versus quarter. Q2 margin was a little better at 14.1% versus for the first 6 months. So Q1 margin wasn't as strong. Now, you could go through and do all that analysis. Now, you could also look at it. How did we do compared to competitors? Now, this is Paysafe. Now, these are in thousands. So this is really 206 million. They're very small compared to the 5.5 billion we're seeing here, right? Revenue of 14 billion. Their revenue is just below $1 billion, and it's 790 million. But you can compare one company to another. It's from a competitive perspective. You can also do the same looking at any company. Now, if you were with me last month, we looked at Lowe's. Now, very apples to oranges, right? PayPal versus a home improvement store. Very different, but you can look at their numbers versus anybody on the comparison. However you want to look at it, that's a great tool. So now what do I know? Well, I know that they had great growth and great profitability. I can actually see in their numbers that we are seeing growth, 7.8% growth on my top line. 1,000% almost growth in my bottom line has to do with a big expense they had one year. They didn't have it the next year. You'd have to look behind that. But I can see their numbers are showing it's good performance. Well, folks, that's the analysis phase. I've now been able to kind of look at it. The last step is, so what are you going to do about it? What do I know? They've had great growth. They got great profitability. They have new assets they're deploying. I can see in their numbers, they actually are seeing growth, and they expect to see growth throughout Q3, which in a month, you're going to get that. August 1st, you can see how they did, not August, November 1st, you can see how they're performing. The last step is to do something with it. And if there's one thing I would have you take away, if you say, Brent, this is interesting, I can see how to use it, and you don't do anything, I've wasted your time. One of the biggest impacts of what we try and do at Acumen Learning, we work with 34 of the Fortune 50, and we had a company do an assessment. What's the value? What's the return you're getting from this program? This is the types of things, as you take these tools and you listen to these calls and you begin to share that with your team, you begin to apply it in your decision making. 84% of our clients who've done our programs, the outcomes, they say they improve the performance in your business and function. You get better results. 81% by doing this, they increase collaboration. Think about that. If you know more about the business, how well you can help other functions execute around their strategy. Improve how you communicate upward. How I communicate to my boss, my executive team. Improved employee engagement. I told you before, once employees understand what we're doing, why we're doing, how they can impact, it is absolutely a game changer. 75% say they increase business focus and 84%. Now that's from going through our program. As we take our tools, give you a boot camp and all the follow-ons to get you to begin to apply it, it's a differentiator. So my friends today, my request is do something with it. To know and not to do is not to know. So the last step of the tool is to say, now that I've done this assessment, what am I going to do about it? So for me, here's how I do it. The first step of that is to ask yourself, what were some of the key insights? Here's some of the ones that stood out. I didn't know that they owned a Venmo until I did the research. They own Venmo. I use Venmo all the time. It's not just customer to consumer or business to business. It's actually peer-to-peer, how we be able to transfer money. Significant growth in their efforts in the commerce market. They're really a big player in that e-commerce market and continue to add to that with new customers every year. Trying to compete with all the large players. As you think about money, transactions, all the players out there, they're seeing their place. And it's not just B2B, it's not just B2C, it's consumer to consumer or peer to peer is another way to say that, right? Very interesting insights as I looked at that. So the next question, so based on what you learned, what are you going to do? Well, I'm a corporate trainer. I train various companies, various industries. So being able to take this information, compare it with their peers, understand how they really play in the market and what they could do to improve that. I would also share that with my consultant team, my clients, and my new customers. How is PayPal impacting the global economy? Now, if you're a part of PayPal, I would love to work with you. Acumen would love to help your employees truly understand what your strategies are and how they can impact that growth. That's what we're all about. So for me, I'd love to be able to work with them. The last step of the tool is to go have a conversation. If it's analyzing your own company, sit down with your manager, share what you learn, and talk about how it's going to impact your role. If it's a competitor or, a customer or partner, be able to take that information, think about how we can strengthen that partnership or how we can drive our customer success, how we can differentiate ourselves in the market. If you analyze a competitor or benchmark company, how can we use what I've learned to be able to differentiate ourselves in the market? Go have those conversations with your management teams, your marketing teams, your sales teams as you move forward. Well, folks, that is the tool. It takes about an hour to go through that process, listening to the call, completing the exercise. What would be different if once a quarter you took 1 hour and did this exercise? Think about how well you'll know what's going on in the business. And I get all the time. I get employees saying, my manager saying, how do you know so much about my business? Or a sales individual talking to a customer and they say, how do you know so much about our business? I wish it's because I'm brilliant. I wish it's because of my academic background. The reason I know so much about PayPal is I can read. Folks, every quarter, this information is available to you. And I promise you, you do 2 to 3 of these consecutively, you'll be very comfortable in this exercise and how to do it. So you remember the second step was to access your notes. Once you've done this once and you keep the notes, you do two to 3 quarters consecutively, you just come back. What did they say last quarter? Okay, now I'm ready to listen. Did they really accomplish? Can I see a trend? That's what the analysts are doing. They listen to what they said the prior quarter, see what happened this quarter, and they question, did you really do it or did you not? A great way that this tool becomes that. So my last question as we wrap up, who are you going to go and analyze? I'm going to give you the tool here in a moment. Are you going to look at a company you want to work for? You're going to look for a company you want to sell to, compete against, partner with, invest in, or just a company, Brent, I'm interested in learning more about them. Or next month, we're going to look at Comcast next month. Let's look at what's happened in that industry. You think about people cutting cords, internet's important, but entertainment, what's the future? you may want to take this tool, listen to their call, and come back and let's have a discussion. That discussion will happen on November 29th. So about 1 month from now, go to this website. You want to access the workbook? You want to start doing something? We got the link in the chat box. Go ahead and download that tool. November 29th, if you go to this link, you'll be able to register for our next event. We're going to look at Comcast. Also, if you're saying, you know what, Brent, this is interesting. I wonder if we could do a deeper dive on this. Reach out to us. We can help you with that. If you're like, hey, I'm interested in just a good review for myself, or I want to do a deeper dive on this, we have our online program, 13 modules, very interactive, that will give you a baseline of how to think about business and financial acumen. If you participate, you sign up through this website right here, you'll get $100 off of that resource. Folks, it's been my pleasure to spend some time with you. Hopefully you found this to be helpful. Please come back, share it with your friends. We're going to stay on if there's any additional question. If not, thank you very much and have a great day.